Alright, in this video I want to show you a couple of things you can do with follow-up using workflow. And if you haven't used workflow before, the concept behind it is basically that an action in your database, such as creating or editing a record or changing a particular field, or a time or date in your database can trigger an action for some records or for a specific record. So examples of that could be when I create a deal, automatically schedule a task, or when a contact moves from being a prospect to a customer, automatically send them an email. It's a system where you have a trigger and then you have one or more actions. And they're really easy to set up in Zoho, and you do that via the setup menu. And then the two examples I'm going to show you today will just hopefully get some ideas going for you. They're fairly basic. And the first one is that we want to automatically schedule a task after we create a deal. So we create a deal, we automatically want a task to remind us to follow up later. And then the second one is that we want to automatically create a task to take some sort of follow-up action if the close date on the deal arrives and we haven't closed the deal yet. So we've got a deal in our pipeline, we've got a close date on it, that date arrives, we haven't done anything with it. I want a task scheduled for me to remind me to do something about it. So the workflow rules happen under automation, and I'll go through this so that even if you haven't done much or any work with the workflow rules before, you'll be able to follow this and kind of get how this works. So I'll click on workflow rules, and then I'm going to create a new rule. So I'll click the create rule button over here, and I have to pick what module is this for. And both of our examples have to do with the deals. The module that you pick is where the triggering action, or what's going to drive the other actions. So if this was based on something happening to a contact record, I would pick contact. In our case, we want to do this when a deal is created, so the rule is going to be for the deals module. And I'll say create follow-up task for new deals. If you want a longer description, you can put that in, but the rule name is going to be the one that shows up in the list here. So give it something that's fairly descriptive. And then we have our visual workflow editor here. So your choices for the most part are executing the workflow either on a record action, which could be creating or editing a record or changing a particular field, or on a specific date. Yeah, I've picked these two examples because they will each use one of these. So in our first example, we want to create a follow-up task for a new deal. We'll want to do this on a record action. And the record action is just create. We have other options as well. We could run the workflow when a record is edited, either created or edited, a specific field or specific fields are updated, or the record is deleted. All right, so in our case, we want this for a new deal that's created. We'll click next. And then we can set specific criteria. So maybe I only want a follow-up task if my deal is over a certain size. So let's leave it alone for this one. We'll run this for all new deal records. Then we'll make sure that in our second example, we narrow that down a little bit and maybe only pick the bigger deals. So now I can take one or more actions, and I can either take instant actions that happen right away or scheduled actions which have some sort of delay. So in this case, I want the follow-up task to be created right away. So I have different options. One of them is tasks. I can also send an email. I can update another field on this record. I can use what's called a webhook, which is a way that I can have Zoho CRM reach out to another web-based application. Or I can have a custom function which will write script, which will give me the flexibility to do all sorts of things, but requires me to do a little bit of programming there. And that's not as scary as it sounds if you're not into programming at all. Some of the stuff you can do sort of drag and drop, cut and paste. But for this one, we're going to keep it straightforward. We're going to create a task. And so my task will be that we're going to create a new task, and the subject of this will be follow up on, and then we'll put the name of the deal in here. So you could just put in follow up on deal, and then all your tasks that are created by this will say follow up on deal, but I want the actual deal name in. It's really easy to do. If I click on this show merge fields here, I can say that from the deal, I want the deal name, and it shows me the code for that, and then you click this little button and that's going to pop that code in here. So now the subject will be follow up on whatever we call the deal. And then we have to specify a due date for this task. So I want that to be the workflow trigger date plus, let's say by default we want our follow up to be scheduled for 2 days after we create the deal. You can always change this. I'll show you how that works. The status of the task will not be completed. We want it to be not started. We'll make it maybe in normal priority, and we're going to automatically assign it to the person who creates the deal. You can change this to be a different person here, but if by default, if you leave this alone, it will be assigned to the person who owns the deal. Now I'm good with the rest of this. I don't need to notify the person it's assigned to because it's going to be the person who creates the deal. I don't want a reminder on it. I'm just going to go ahead and hit save and associate. All right, so that's all there is to it. We'll go ahead and save this and then we'll test it and make sure it works. Just to review, this workflow is going to run when we create a deal record. It's going to run against any deal record regardless of the field values. There's no criteria for it. And then the action that we take is we will schedule a follow-up task with the name of the deal in the subject line for 2 days after the deal was created. I'll go ahead and save this. All right, so now to prove that works, let's go ahead and find a contact and then create a deal for them. So I'm going to click on contacts here, and then I will pick a contact, and let's go create a new deal. All right, so the deal name will be 1,000 widgets for John's Auto. The amount of this will be $13,000. Closing date, let's make that the 28th. Stage has to be filled in, so we're going to put this at the quote stage, and then we'll go ahead and save this. Now, right away, because the workflow ran on create, this happens really fast. You can see that there's an open activity here already. And that open activity is follow up on, and then the name of the deal here. So it's scheduled for 2 days out from today automatically. Now, if I wanted to change this to a different date, really easily, click on the edit, change the date, make that a week further out if I like, and save it again. And now that activity to follow up shows up on the deal itself here. If I'm reviewing the deal, I can see that there's an outstanding task. You can also see that deal will show up if you go to the contact record. For this, I've got Susan Brown here, so if I go to that, actually I'm on Susan Brown's record already, so I can see that the open activity is there. You can also see it if you go to the deal itself. You'll see that the open activity is there. As well, if you go to the account, you'll see it there too. So you can't miss it when you're looking at the related records. And of course, this will also show up in my activities under my open tasks or any other view that I would expect this to show up in. All right, so the second example that we want to do is to automatically create a task if we get to the close date and we haven't closed the deal either as won or lost yet. So for example, let's go back to our deal. Every deal has a closing date on it. Sometimes this is your best guess at when you'll get the business. And so we put September 28th on this. I might like to have a task automatically get created if September 28th rolls around and I haven't done anything with this yet. Now, of course, one of the things that is helpful as well, if we go into our deals section and we could also create a view that would show us all of our deals that were overdue. But if we want a task to be created just to remind us of that specific deal, that's really easy to set up as well. So I'll walk you through that. That's another good workflow example. So we're going to go to Setup, and then under Automation, again, go to Workflow Rules. You can see the rule that we just added is still here. It's in the Deals module. We're going to create one more. So this one again will be for the Deals module because this is based on the close date field within the deal. Ask if not closed by close date. All right, so we'll hit next. And then this one instead is not going to be on a record action. This is going to be on a date or date time. Difference is a date field just has a date. So for example, September 6th. whereas a date time includes a time which could be September 6th, 1:10 p.m. for example. All right, so we want this to be on a specific date time, and we want this to be 0 days after, or we can actually say on, be even easier than that. We want this to be executed on, and then we have the date fields here that are available in the deal. If you've added additional date fields to your deal records, they'll show up here as options too. In our case, we just want this to run on the closing date. And even though our closing date is just a date field without a time on it, you do need to pick when you want this to run. So I'm going to set this for 6 a.m. just so that by the time I'm in, it's definitely going to have run. And we're only going to want this to recur once for each deal. And then we want to set the rules for this. Now, if I go ahead and pick all records, I'll get a task created for every deal that gets to the close date but hasn't been closed yet. But maybe I only want that task to be created for deals of a certain size. So in this case, I'm going to say that the deal amount has to be greater than or equal to $5,000. Okay, and now I will do the same thing as last time. I'll create a task. And actually, let's back up there. I'm not done with my criteria yet. I want to check that the amount is over $5,000, but I also want to make sure that the deal hasn't been closed yet. If the deal's closed, either way, great, I don't have to do anything further with it. But for my example, I want to check and make sure I only want to create the task if the deal is still out there. So this will be at the stage. We want to look at the stage of the deal. Isn't either close won, close lost, or close to competition. I know if it's anything else, I know that's open still, and I want the task to be created. Alright, so now I'll set up my action, same as last time. Create a task, and I'll create a new task because I want the name of this to be slightly different. I'll say close date arrived, follow up on, and if feel free to use abbreviations on this if you need to. So I'm going to put that in there, and then I want the name of the deal on this. So the deal name, insert that, and I want this to be scheduled for the date of the close date. So when this just means when the workflow actually runs, that's what this is, plus 0 days. And I want the status of that to be not started again, and maybe I want this to be high, because if I expected to be doing something with this deal by now, I don't want to wait any longer. I want to make sure this is at the top of my list. So save and associate. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and save that. Now that one's a little harder to test out because I actually have to have a deal created where the close date is right now, and then I have to line up the time, and these only run, this one's set to run at 6 a.m. so it's harder to demo that one, but just to review how this works, if this workflow runs on the closing date of the deal at 6 a.m. and only if the amount is greater than or equal to $5,000, and if it hasn't been closed yet, so it's not closed won, it's not closed lost, and it's not closed lost to competition, then we are going to create a task very similar to the first workflow. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. Now, if at any point you decide you want to turn these off, it's as simple as clicking the button here to slide this over and make it inactive, and then that workflow won't run anymore. But hopefully this has given you a couple of good ideas for automating follow-up, as well as just how workflow in general works.